What up, everybody? It's Joey Jojo again, bringing you Chapter 4 of Umineko, Episode 1, Legend of the Golden Witch. The previous chapter, we basically saw the dynamic between the Shiromiyas and how they treat each other. Not only how they treat each other, but with their servants back at the house on the island that they own. We met Kanon and we met Goda? Yeah, we met those two. Upcoming chapter, we're gonna see some more servants. So yeah, let's get started on chapter 4. The four of us cousins were shooting the breeze over all kinds of topics. After all, there are both girls and guys here. Plus, we've got people all over. We got people over a wide spread of ages: adult, high school, and elementary school. All each of us had to do was talk about ourselves, and it would be a great interest to the other three.
なんかやっと馴染んできたぜ。ジェシカもマリアも6年前からは想像もつかないくらい成長しちまったからよ。正直なところ少しだけ違和感を持ってたんだが、こうして話をしているうちに中身はあの頃から何も変わってないことが分かったぜ。
同じ言葉を返してやるよ。バトラだって6年ぶりだってのに全然変わってねえぜ。図体がいくらでかくなっても中身は相変わらずお子様だってことだな。マリ
アもお子様、マリアもお子様。
マリアだっていつまでもお子様じゃねえぞ。お子様から可愛いお姫様に成長してくんだからな。そうしたらまな板みてえな胸もすぐジェシカ並みになるぞ。そしたら揉ませてくれよ、約束だぞ。
揉ませる、約束する。
ダメだよマリアちゃん。
Yeah, she is too young to make that type of promise. And not only that, that's your cousin in the first place. Like, what the actual hell?
そんな約束しちゃダメ。
約束したから揉ませる。マリア、約束は守る。絶対守る。
マリア、お前本当に素直ないい子だな。お前と結婚する未来の旦那さんはきっと
っていい話にすり替えつつ約束を保持してんじゃねえぜ。マリア、その約束はなしなし。
約束取り消し。
やっぱりバトラ君も揃って4人で集まらないといとこが集合した気がしなかったね。この6年はやっぱり寂しかったよ。
そうだな、こういうふざけた話にはならなかったな。でも建設的な話はできてたと思ったぜ。将来に対する心構えとか受験とか就職とかよ。
悪うございましたね。俺が来たらおまぬけなドタバタばっかりでよ。
でもマリアは今年のが楽しい。
そうだね、僕も同感。今年が一番楽しいよ。
Maria's sincere words probably spoke for everyone. When George Aniki stroked Maria's head, she giggled like a happy kitten.
失礼いたします。お食事のご用意ができました。
A timid knocking sound and an equally timid young woman's voice came through the door. Jessica answered brightly.
シャノン、入れよ。バトラは覚えてるだろ。
Jessica stood up from the bed and opened the door. There stood a servant girl who was definitely about our age.
ご無沙汰いたしております。バトラ様、6年ぶりでございます。シャノンです。
Noting my presence and trembling a little, she bowed deeply.
ジェシカにも驚かされたが、シャノンちゃんにも驚かされたぜ。あんたもすっかり美人になったじゃねえのよ。
もったいないお言葉。
しかしよ、この島じゃよっぽど食事の栄養価が高いんじゃねえのか。 何を食ってどこを鍛えたらそんなにでっかいお胸になるんだか。ジェシカとどっちがでけえかちょいと触って確かめさせてもらうぜ。
Yeah, he's a pervert. With both hands poised and saliva dribbling from my mouth, I closed in. For the sake of my honor and justice, I like to point out that I don't suffer from some strange disease that makes my lip nodes itch until I scratch my neck open, and which can only be prevented by rubbing breasts. It's just my battler-style way of communicating. When a boy closes in on a girl like this, 9 times out of 10 they get slapped or clobbered, right? This is a battler-sama original communication technique, aiming for a gag like that to break the ice. Well, that means I really do get to touch them on that 1 in 10 chance, though, right? Hee hee hee. I've never asked for that much, though. By now, my hands were less than a centimeter away from Chanan-chan's chest, but the counter-strike had yet to come. She understood what was going on, and she was blushing and had her head lowered in embarrassment. But she was just standing there with both hands politely joined in front of her, not even trying to resist or cover her breasts. Whoa, I wasn't planning on this. But please hit me now. At this rate, I'm seriously gonna touch them. Which is why I was glad that Jessica chose that time to drive her elbow into the back of my head.
ジェシカありがとうよ。
なんで私が感謝されんだ。
いやいやすまんぜシャノンちゃん。魅力的な胸に思わず吸着されそうになっちまった。つうかさすがにあの間合いまで来たら犯罪確定だろ。ダメだぜ抵抗しなきゃよ。
ですけどバトラ様は大切なお客様ですし。
お客様でも犯罪は犯罪。女の子の胸はだいたい10センチくらいからが防空識別圏だな。2センチ圏まで侵入してきたらこれはもう領空侵犯だぜ。スクランブル発進で即ビンタを食らわせてやれ。
そんなことできません。私たちは家具ですし。
Of course, she didn't want her breasts touched, but if a guest so desired, she intended to sacrifice her own needs in an effort to accommodate them. A girl like this needs some urgent protection.
今時こんな献身美徳な子がいるとは。軽いめまいすら覚えるぜ。でもダメだ。ダメなんだ。俺がいやらしい顔で迫る。は倒す。いやエッチ。そういうお約束じゃないとオチがつかねえんだよ。頼むよお願いでよ。俺を引っ叩いてくれよ。こうバチンとバチンと。
お願いは聞けません。家具ですから。でも命令ならお聞きします。それが務めですから。
じゃあ命令させてもらうことにするよ。次からバトラ君が胸に触ろうとしてきたら平手打ちで反撃すること。いいね。
はい、仰せつかりました。以後そのようにさせていただきます。バトラ様、ご承知おきくださいませ。
So Chanan-chan declared while bowing elegantly to me. Her facial expression was radiant. I gave her a thumbs up to signal, "You got it."
6年前はお手伝いさんの連れ子がついでにお手伝いみたいな印象だったんだけど、すっかり一人前の使用人さんだな。今年で何年になるんだ。
はい、おかげさまで10年ほどお使いさせていただいております。
She's Shannon. Alright, so character tip, not character tip, character profile. Go to Shannon. A young but experienced servant. She's normally calm and performs her jobs flawlessly, but she messes up when she gets nervous. Furthermore, Shannon is nothing more than a pseudonym that she uses when on duty, not her real name. Okay, so it's kind of similar to canon. The kanji for her name are read as Shannon. This is another far from typical name for a Japanese person. Being a kid back in those days, I had taken in her name without paying it much attention. But for her to call me something like that is pretty unusual given that she isn't even a member of the Ushirimiya family. Maybe it's like a servant's professional name or something? If so, I can kind of understand why that Kanakun's name sounds the way that it does too. She's a long-term servant who served here since she was 6. Since her body has changed radically, she didn't match my memories, but we used to know each other 6 years ago. It looked like she was just as shy as she had been in the past, but I got the sense that she had become imbued with the charm befitting a girl her age. Especially her breasts. Her breasts.
さっき会ったカノン君は彼女の弟なんだよ。
弟というわけでは。でも、私のことを姉と慕ってくれます。何か失礼なことはしませんでしたか？
相変わらずいつも通りだぜ。もうちょっと愛想よくすればいいのによ。
カノン君がご迷惑をおかけしたようで申し訳ございません。
別に迷惑なんか何も。同じ男としてわかるさ。ありゃ愛想が悪いのは当たり前だぜ。
マリアもよく言われる。愛想悪いって言われる。カノンと一緒。マリア様は愛想悪くなんかありません。一緒がよかった。
食事の準備ができたんだっけ？
はい、失礼いたしました。お食事のご用意が整いましたので、皆様をお屋敷へご案内いたします。
Shannon bowed again formally and returned to her duty mode. We realized that if we made her stick around for any more light conversation, it would actually make it harder for her to do her job. So we got up off our butts to avoid interfering with her work any further.
じゃあ、お屋敷に行こうか。みんなもお腹が空いてたところでしょ。
だな。ゴーダさんがいる時の飯は楽しみなんだよ。あの人、どこぞの有名ホテルでシェフをやってたらしくて、かなり料理の腕があるんだぜ。
ほうほう。それ楽しみ。行こうぜマリア。ガツガツ犬みたいに食い散らかすぞ。
犬みたいに食い散らかす。
ダメダメ。バトラ君の言うことはいちいち真に受けちゃダメだよ。全部冗談なんだから。さあ、行こう行こ
う。Under Shannon-chan's guidance, we headed toward the mansion. Met once again by the magnificent rose garden, we continue onward as it came into view, the imposing mansion of the Ushirimiya main family. It had apparently been built shortly after the war, so you could feel the dignity of almost a half a century hanging about it. On the surface, the building was gorgeous, but being as old as it was seemingly lacking in modern amenities like air conditioning. According to Jessica, midwinter was especially tough with all the drafts. Well, it's not like they couldn't just take the kotatsu out. As we entered the entrance hall, an aged servant greeted us. Now him I remember. As the most senior member of the staff, Genji-san served as the head of the servants. Alright, character profile time for Genji, Rono Genji. Head servant, leading all the other servants who work for the Ushirimiya family, has served Kinzo longer than any other and has earned his greatest trust. Since he served Kinzo directly, Cross and Natsuhi think of him as Kinzo's spy. As our eyes met, he saluted us with a composed voice. He didn't give quite a refined bow as Goda's, but it was a bow that had feeling, even if it wasn't polished to the same degree.
Genji-san! 本当にお久しぶりっす。お元気そうですね。
おかげさまで健やかに過ごさせていただいております。バトラ様こそご立派になられました。親方様の若き日に少し似てこられましたな。
俺がじい様に？ってことはさぞやじい様は若い頃モテたろうな。
ここからはシャノンに代わって私がご案内申し上げます。 どうぞこちらへ。
Shanshan bowed deeply and saw us off. Leaving the entrance hall, we headed to the dining hall under Genji-san's guidance. Genji-san, just like Kumasawa-san, stood in stark contrast to us young people who have grown beyond recognition over the last 6 years. His figure was exactly the same as in my memories of 6 years ago. It seems like time had stopped since the last we met. Genji-san was a silent and diligent person. He was like grandfather's close aide of caregiver. In fact, you could even go as far as to say he was grandfather's right-hand man. Actually, it seemed that he was by grandfather's side more than my late grandmother was. According to Jessica, grandfather trusted him more than any of his blood relatives. But I wonder how long he served. I never asked for details, but I think I heard he's been here since the beginning when this mansion was constructed. That is to say, he's dedicated half of his life to serving here. No wonder grandfather trusts him. As we cut through the open ceilinged hall behind Genji-san, I found something that I had no memory of from 6 years ago. It was an awfully big portrait hung right in front of the stairs that rose to the second floor. Without thinking, I stopped walking under its spell. Since I'd suddenly stopped, Maria, who was falling behind me, ran into my back.
ああ、悪い。なあ、ジェシカ、あんな絵、前はあったっけ？
I pointed at the large and conspicuous portrait hanging in the wall, in the hall. Everyone else stopped too.
ああ、そっか。バトラが来てた頃にはあれはかけられてなかったっけ？いつからだったかな。
確か僕の記憶が正しければ一昨年あたりだったと思うよ。
さようでございます。一昨年の4月に親方様がかねてより画家に命じて描かせていたものをあそこに展示なされたのでございます。
あのじいさまがね、わざわざ描かせてか。
The portrait depicted a woman in an elegant dress who gave off a sense of refinement and who seemed to suit the Western style of this mansion. I couldn't have guessed her age, but the sharpness and obvious strength of will in her eyes gave me the impression of youth. It was a different feeling than the composed mood of middle-aged women that are often in famous pictures. If this woman had normal black hair, I might have thought it was a portrait of my long-deceased grandmother in her prime. However, this woman in the portrait had beautiful golden hair and didn't look Japanese at all.
で、誰だい？このご婦人はよ。
As though trying to show off her knowledge, Maria answered that simple question with authority.
マリア知ってる。ベアトリーチェ。
ベア、なんだって？
ベアトリーチェ、魔女だよ。バトラ君は昔聞かされたことない？
魔女？ってこの島の？
I think I already said this, but Rokenjima is a small island that's only about 10 kilometers around. However, considering that only the Oshirimiya family lives here, that's quite large. So only a harbor and the site around the mansion were set up to be lived in. Beyond that, the island remained as untouched as it was when it was still uninhabited. To understand just how dangerous a vast and empty forest with no lamplight, phones, or people passing through it at all actually is. Whoa. No lamplight, phones, or people passing through it at all actually is. You need to shift your urban assumptions a little. You see, if by any chance you fell down a hole in the depths of the forest and sprained your ankle, cried or screamed, no one would come save you. If it then got dark, the forest, where there are no streetlights, would become enshrouded in complete darkness. Also, since there obviously aren't any guideposts here, it's easy to get lost and lose your sense of direction in the dark forest. Nowadays, most people see a forest as a peaceful place. But to the people of bygone eras, before the light of civilization drove out the night, forests were like oceans on land, geographically separating one culture from another. Just as fishermen who go out into the ocean occasionally have their lives put in danger despite their technical knowledge. Technical knowledge was also was also demanded of hunters who went out into the forest, and their lives were occasionally put in danger just the same. If a child were to play in that dangerous forest, something terrible might happen. Some parents must have had that thought. Maybe my grandmother, or possibly the man himself, my grandfather, might have said it. Or maybe it was a story handed down on this island from long, long ago. There's a terrible witch in the forest, so you must not go in. Thus, Rokenjima's ghost story was born. That is the legend of the witch of Rokenjima. So, when we say witch on this island, we're referring to the master of the vast and salvaged forest. Which reminds me, when I was little and stayed at this mansion, during the eerie nights when the wind and rain struck the windows, stories like the witch of the forest is roaming around in search of a sacrifice would scare the heck out of me. Beatrice. As I searched my memory prompted by Anarchy, I did vaguely remember being told that was her name when I was very small.
なるほどな。しかし、あの魔女伝説の魔女にベアトリーチェなんておしゃれな名前がついてたとはとんと忘れてたぜ。じいさまめ。孫たちが信じないもんだからわざわざ絵に描きやがったか。
じいさまの妄想の中の魔女だよ。この絵を掲げた頃から現実と幻想の区別がつかなくなり始めた。私たちにとっては想像の中の魔女に過ぎないけど、じいさまにとっては彼女はこの島にいる存在。いる。だからそれを理解することができない私たちにもわかるようあの絵を描かせたって言うんだけど気持ち悪いったらありゃしないぜ。
お嬢様、親方様にとっては大切な肖像画です。親方様の前でそのようにおっしゃられることがございませんよ。
分かってるぜ。頼まれても言わねえよ。
Jessica turned away after glaring a second at the
行こう
portrait.
よ。食堂にみんなを待たせてるよ。
お腹すいた。
Only a small portion of this island is controlled by the Shiromea family. If all the wild remain was the witch Beatrice's domain, then one could say that she was the being who actually ruled over Rokenjima. That unsettling, ominous feeling I had felt on the boat trip when I learned that the shrine had been struck by lightning revived within me a bit. At the time, Kumasawa-san had tried to tell an anonymous story about Rokenjima and had been stopped by Jessica. I didn't know what she had tried to tell us about this island, but there was one thing I did know. Rokenjima's ruler was not the Oshimiya family. It was the witch Beatrice. Yes, because this was the witch's island.
バトラー！遅い！
When I looked around, everyone was already heading toward the dining hall. I hurriedly chased after them. We walked up to the huge double doors that led to the dining hall. Genji-san knocked.
お子様方をお連れいたしました。失礼いたします。
The door was open, and we were invited inside. The dining hall, which screamed filthy rich, featured a strong, long table which was obviously designed with no other purpose than to make the guests conscious of their rank. And our parents were already seated at it in accordance with that ordering.
遅えぞガキども。早く席につけよ。
The old bastard pressed us to sit. Only the places where we would sit were empty at the long table, which only made us feel our tardiness all the more. The seat at the very head of the table, which you might call the seat of honor, was for the most highly ranked and reserved for grandfather. It was still empty. He was probably planning to come in last to make himself look important. The seating order, as you faced the seat of honor, went from left to right in rows of 2, with the ranking being lower the further you were from it. So, on the left-hand side of the row closest to the seat of honor was the second-ranked seat, belonging to the eldest of the adult siblings, Uncle Cross. It looked like he hadn't arrived yet either, so that seat was empty. And then, opposite him, on the right-hand side of the first row, sat the eldest daughter of the family, Auntie Eva, ranked as number 3. The left-hand side of the second row was for number 4. There sat the old bastard, Rudolph, as the third of the siblings. Opposite him sat number 5, the youngest sibling, Auntie Rosa. Going like this, you might think that the next ones to come would be their husbands and wives, but I guess again, because the left-hand seat in the following third row, meaning rank number 6, was actually Jessica's seat. Opposite her was George Anaki. Then, the seat next to Jessica was me, and opposite me was Maria. And next to me, on the left-hand side of the 5th row, all the way down at number 10, finally came Aunt Natsuhi. Opposite her was Uncle Hideyoshi. And next to Aunt Natsuhi in the 6th and final row on the left-hand side was Kiri-san. The seat opposite of Kiri-san had been laid out like the others, but was empty. According to this ranking system, that spot was the seat where Auntie Rosa's husband should be sitting. He hasn't come, as far as I know. Yet the table had been laid for his seat. These kind of ranking orders usually permit the spouse a corresponding status, but the Oshirimiya family had an original kind of ranking. Maybe it's a leftover of male chauvinism? Under the notion that a mother's room is only a temporary house for the child and she contributes no genes, the child of direct descent would have the highest ranking, following by the grandkids, meaning that the spouses with no blood ties will be considered the last in line. It's terrible, but according to that ranking order, grandmother, if she was still alive, would be in a position even lower than mine. In youth, obey your father. After marriage, your husband. After aging, your children. A leftover of the times when they used to say, women, no home in 3 worlds. Long ago, when I was still incapable of figuring all this out, I thought it was so great that we could all chat with the adult siblings sitting in their group, and us cousins in ours. However, now that I can re-examine the seating order after growing up a bit, it stirs up some very complicated feelings in me. Aunt Natsuhi, married to the eldest son of the family, responsible for managing the household, and number 2 for all practical intent and purposes, sat to my right, which meant that she was 2 steps lower than me in the ranking order. It was difficult to guess what was going through her head. That's why I made a small apologetic gesture before sitting down.
お久しぶりですね、バトラ君。ずいぶん背が伸びましたね。
ああ、はい。食ったり食べたり食事したりしてたらいつの間にかこんな身長に。
さすが男の子ね。身長はいくつくらいあるの？
180かな。
That's about 5'11".
つうかおばさん、そこは食べてばっかりじゃねえかって突っ込んでくださいよ。
え？ああごめんなさいね。
After a moment, she gave a small laugh, but it seemed she couldn't quite figure out what she was supposed to be laughing at. This woman is Aunt Natsuhi. We got her character profile. Let's go ahead and read that. Where's she at? Oh, right here. Ushirimiya Natsuhi, Cross's wife, manages the household of the Ushirimiya head family in place of her husband, who takes little interest. For this family conference, again, she was the one who took charge of making all the preparations and arrangements. Possesses a strong sense of responsibility and a great deal of pride. However, neither her husband nor her siblings nor his siblings understand her very well, so her position is far from inviolable. She's the wife of the eldest son of the family, meaning she is my dad's older brother's wife. It is easier to get it if I call her Jessica's mother. It feels bad to say it like this, but not that I hate her, but I didn't particularly like her. She never got into our kids' circle, and my only impression of her was as someone who always talked about complicated stuff with my parents while having a crabby expression on her face. The fact is that having barely ever exchanged words, I hesitate a lot even just now about how to approach her. And it was pretty much a flop. The silverware had been tidily set up on the table, but the meal itself hadn't been brought in. As a rule, the meal doesn't start until the man at the head of the table had taken his seat. So as long as grandfather, the highest rank, didn't come, lunch would be indefinitely on hold. Not even the appetizers would come. In other words, this silence in the dining hall was the sound of our parents as they withstood their hunger and waited, on tenterhooks, for grandfather to come. Except the grandfather I remembered always showed up at the right time when we ate together like this. He wouldn't even have been so late as to have everyone else waiting on him.
遅えな、じいさま。俺の記憶じゃ時間に厳格な人だったと思うんだけどな。
まあ、6年前はそうだったかもな。最近はそうでもねえよ。というか、もう自分の世界オンリーって感じで会食にも顔を出さねえぜ。さすがに今日くらいは足並みを揃えてくれるって思ってたんだけどな。まあ、私は来ない方が気楽で嬉しいけどよ。
ジェシカ。
After being scolded by her mother, Jessica faced the other way, sticking her tongue out. No way around it. Nothing to do but wait for the host to arrive. When I glanced at the clock, I saw that it was almost 20 past 12. The aged master of the Ushirimiya head house, Ushirimiya Kinzo. So let's read his profile. Man himself, Ushirimiya Kinzo, the aged head of the Ushirimiya family, brimming with energy, despite being pronounced to have only a short time left to live, amassed a vast fortune, but has never made an announcement about his inheritance, which worried his children. Strongly influenced by the West and a rabid fan of the occult, his study is packed with mysterious grimoires. He was there in his study. The clock showed noon, but he didn't even attempt to get up. With reading glasses on his face, he stacked up old-fashioned books with elaborately designed bindings one on top of another beside him, immersing himself in their reading. It definitely didn't look like it was for his leisure. On the contrary, he exuded impatience, crisis, as though every minute, every second were precious. The sealed room was dense with dancing dust particles, and the air stagnated with a mix of smells of various elixirs, each giving off its own suspicious stench. They were somehow sweet and heavy. For anyone with a good nose, the first thing they'd do after entering would be to open a window and ventilate the room. The knocking against the study door had been going on for a while. A voice calling father sometimes mingled with the knocks. As Kinzo heaved a deep sigh, he snapped shut the old book he had in his hands and slammed it on the table. Then he yelled at Cross, who was continuing to knock on the door.
その音を止めぬか愚か者。叩けば扉は開かれると誰が教えた。そのバカ者は貼り付けにしたぞ。お前もそうされたいのか。お父さん、年に一度の親族会議の日ではありませんか。皆下に集まっています。どうかおいでください。
Cross called out to his father through the door. Kinzo always shut himself up in the study and hated letting even his family into the room. For that reason, Cross had no choice but to call out thus through dust from the corridor.
私にかがうでない。皆とは何か私をここから引きずり出そうとする者どもなのか。ならば殺してしまい、バラバラにして薪にして魔女の炉にくべてしまい、その炉には鍋をかけて苦いおもぎを煮るがいい。黙示録の煮汁はそれでも私をここから連れ出そうとするバカ者どもに飲ませてやれ。残りは酒につけるのだ。ああ、源氏はどこだ。源氏を呼べ。苦害の魔紙を用意させろ。緑の妖精のささやきが届かぬ。ああ、源氏はどこだ。源氏を呼べ。
Before the door, Cross, Nanjo, and Genji kept waiting for the master of the house, who would not come out.
すっかり嫌われてしまったようだ。もう私の声では何も届かんよ。
Cross shrugged, as though saying, "It's no use," and smiled bitterly. He himself hadn't believed for a moment that his father would answer his calls. However, as it was the duty of the eldest son, he had formally made the request.
金蔵さん、あんたの顔を見に息子や娘や孫たちが来てるんじゃないか。ちょっと顔を見せてやったらどうだね。うるさい、黙れ。私に意見するというか何条。貴様など呼んではおらぬ。私は源氏を呼べと言ったのだ。さあ急げ、すぐに呼べ。時間は常に有限だ。人たちはすでにラッパを構えているぞ。なぜにそれがわからぬか、愚かな羊どもめ。
Kinzo slammed the old heavy book on the table over and over. The racket obviously indicated his highest displeasure. Kinzo put his skepticals down and flew up from his chair. He spread his arms wide open, as if to sing to a packed opera house, as if appealing to someone, and yelled,
なぜだ。なぜにいつも私には邪魔が入るのか。すべてを捨てよう、すべてを捧げよう。その見返りに私は一つしか求めないというのに。ああ、ベアトリーチェ、お前の微笑みをもう一度見られるならば、私は世界中から美少を奪い取り、すべてをお前に捧げよう。おお、イナゴの軍団長たちよ、世界中から美少を刈り取り収穫せ。すべてが汚らわしい、すべてが煩わしい。なぜこの貴重な一日に私は邪魔を受けねばならぬのか。源氏を呼べ。
何を怒鳴ってるのかもさっぱりだな。もう頭がどうにかなっているのだろう。
クラウスさん、実のお父さんにそりゃあんまりじゃないかね。
親父はすでに死んでいる。ここにいるのは親父だったものの幻さ。
It's kind of harsh to say.
いずれにせよ本人にここを出る意志がない以上どうにもならんね。
金蔵さん。
Choking coughs continued to pour from the study.
私は下に戻る。ゴーダの自慢のランチをこれ以上無駄に冷ましてしまうことはない。親類たちにとって当家での数少ない楽しみだろうからな。
Cross spun on his heels. He looked at his wrist watch, mumbling and acting as though he had wasted time doing something he knew would be in vain.
源氏さん、親父殿がお呼びだ。相手を頼む。
かしこまりました。
南條先生、食事に行きましょう。いつまでもここにいるとこの甘い匂いで味覚までおかしくなってしまう。
Without waiting for Nanjo, Cross went downstairs. Genji urged Nanjo to go and eat. Nanjo looked first to Cross's back as he disappeared down the stairs, then to the study door, and he let out a deep sigh.
すまんが源氏さん頼みます。
はい、お任せください。
お酒はなるべく与えないように。あれは常習性が強すぎる。源氏はまだか。何者が源氏を阻んでいるというのか。源氏はどこだ。源氏を呼べ。
さあ、ここはお任せください。
すみませんな。
Nanjo gave a small duck of his head and descended the stairs. Genji saw him off and knocked at the study door.
親方様、源氏でございます。
源氏か。何故私をこれほどに待たすのか。そこには誰もおるまいな。
はい、私だけでございます。
Kinzo returned to his seat in the study and pressed an old-fashioned switch on the table. After a small delay, the heavy sound of the door unlocking could be heard. Kinzo believed that his family might try to break into his study. Perhaps someone once opened the window for some air and scattered some important documents or something, and that had made him extremely upset. Now, Kinzo had placed a secure lock in his door, making it so that without his permission no one could enter, and locking himself in the dungeon he himself created. Genji, who he trusted the most, was relatively free to enter the room, but even that was not absolute. If Kinzo was in a bad mood, even he wouldn't be able to enter. Anyone else would be limited to holding a conversation through the door, not even seeing his face. And most of the time, they wouldn't even get a real conversation. However, that didn't pose any particular problem for the family. That was because there was no reason to go out of their way to interfere with the retirement of the cantankerous and aged head. The fact that he was completely immersed in his old research and always locked up in his hideaway was something of a benefit. They made the most of his refusal to leave the study Sorry about that. They made the most of his refusal to leave the study, entrusting him to the hands of the servants while they themselves kept their distance.
源氏、いつものやつを頼む。私は忙しい。
はい。
Genji headed to the corner of the study. There, suspicious-looking bottles boasting venomous colors were on display. They were actually liquor, but considering that they were placed in this shady-looking room, you could almost suspect that they might be ghastly poisons. The inside of the study was filled with the mountainous library of outlandish books that Kinzo had amassed. They were bizarre old books, some banned, and each and every one of them either forbidden, cursed, or sealed. Of course, if one were to actually call them old books, Kinzo would fly into a rage and say something like this: call them grimoires. There were candles which had melted in a suspicious-looking fashion and taken on peculiar forms, and all manner of other strange objects, probably having something to do with black magic. The constellations covering the celestial globe could have caused anyone who knew the night sky well to raise an eyebrow. The illustrations inscribed in old books, haphazardly left open, ranged from religious and mystical to the demonic and grotesque, as well as bizarre diagrams of various magic circles, and above all, the sweet poisonous smell that filled the room, which to those entering for the first time would surely be profound assault on their sense of sight, smell, and all other senses, making them lose their grip on reality. Inside that study, Genji, with his well-trained hand, prepared Kinzo's usual drink. If you didn't know that the ghastly dark green liquid that filled the complexly designed bottle was liquor, you certainly wouldn't want to put it in your mouth. He poured a small quantity of the spirit into the glass. placed a cube of sugar in a strangely shaped spoon, and then poured water from a pitcher over it. Strangely, when the colorless water was poured into it, the dark green liquid turned a cloudy white. It created the strange visual illusion that the water had caused a chemical reaction, which made it all the more difficult to perceive the concoction as liquor. To this, he added an original flavoring that Kenzo liked, and fine-tuned the taste. There was no recipe. Its success was measured only by Kenzo's mood swings when he drank it, and he had learned how to make it only after many decades. Genji placed the glass on a tray and made his way over to Kenzo. Kenzo was now gazing out the window.
どうぞ、親方様。
ああ、すまん。
Kenzo had regained his composure, so much that he was now unrecognizable as the man who had been shouting, screaming, and yelling just moments before. If the man's back dwelt a dignity and intelligence made plain simply by how he tilted his glass and gazed down at the scenery beyond the window. Genji, in order to allow Kenzo to set down his glass any time, motionlessly waited behind and to his left, as though he were a living sideboard. As he did, Kenzo struck out just the glass. His gaze still directed at the world outside the window. There was just a mouthful remaining. It was not a gesture intended to set up upon the tray, as Genji expected, but was a motion to hand the glass over to Genji.
飲め、我が友よ。
もったいないお言葉です。
私とお前の中に儀礼はいらぬ。飲め、友よ。
いただきます。
Genji respectfully received the glass and inclined it a little to taste its contents. Then he downed it in one gulp.
お前が作るのを真似ているのだが、どうにも同じ味が出ぬ。お前が作る方がうまい。
ありがとうございます。親方様のご指導の賜物です。
Kenzo smiled at his little subject, who refused to put aside rank even when asked to. However, he was not making fun of him. It was relaxed, like a smile at a close friend's unriddable bad habit.
互いにおいたな。年を数えることも忘れてすでに久しい。
今日まで過ごすことをお許しいただけたのも、すべて親方様のおかげでございます。
Kenzo gave a thin smile, as if to say he didn't need compliments.
今日まで本当によく私に仕えてくれた。息子たちは誰もが私を変人呼ばわりした。大勢いた使用人も皆私を恐れてやめていった。お前だけが今でも私に仕えてくれる。
もったいないお言葉です。
私の余命もそう長くはあるまい。息子たちは私の遺産がいつ転がり込んでくるかをうろうろ待つハゲタカばかりだ。クラウスの愚か者は金を湯水のように使い、1枚の金貨を売るのに2枚の金貨を捨てておる。それで金を稼げたなどと妄言を。エヴァは金の亡者だ。あやつは私を鶏か何かだと思っておる。死んだらガラにして出汁まで取る気だ。ルドルフの間抜けは女遊びばかり。ローザはどこの馬の骨ともわからん男の赤ん坊など産みおって、ジェシカは無能で無学だ。ジョージには男としての器がない。
It's funny how he thinks that about George when George to me is like the most mature out of everybody, to be honest. I'm kind of surprised he said that about him.
バトラーは後ろ宮家の栄誉を自ら捨ておった愚か者だ。マリアなど見るのも汚らわしい。
She's just a little girl. You know, she's just being a kid. I mean, hey.
なぜだ、なぜに後ろ宮の血はこうも無能なのか。私の築き上げた栄光を受け継ぐにふさわしい者はおらんのか。 ああ、分かっておるとも。これがベアトリーチェの呪いであることも分かっておる。黄金の魔女め、それが私への復讐のつもりか。憎みたくば憎むがよい。逃げたければ逃げるがよい。逃がさぬ、逃がさぬ、逃がさぬ、逃がさぬ。お前は私のものだ。常に私の腕の中でなくてはならん。私の生涯の全てなのだ。我が鳥かごにて永遠に私だけにささやき続けるのだ。ベアトリーチェ、なぜに微笑み返してはくれぬ。ベアトリーチェ。
After howling, Kinzo choked once again. Genji set the tray and the glass down and patted his master's back. Genji's facial expression did not change. It was always like this. After his almost deranged outburst for the past few minutes settled down, Kinzo regained his composure once more. The way his attitude changed was like seeing two different people, a wild Kinzo and a composed Kinzo, living together inside one body.
私は決心した。このままぼやききった妖精を怠慢に過ごすことなどもはや耐えられはせん。この身に最後にとするコインがあるならば、それを悪魔たちのルーレットに託してみたい。魔法の力はいつもかけるリスクで決まる。日本古来の呪術である牛の国参りがそうであろう。7日間儀式を目撃されてはならないというリスクを支払うからこそ魔力が宿る。困難なリスクが生じれば生じるほどに魔力は強く生じるのだ。神話に登場する数々の奇跡が天文学的リスクに奇跡的な低確率を得て成就した驚愕すべき魔力の結晶なのだと言える。モーゼが海を割ったのは神の奇跡ではない。蹂躙の計りに乗せられ軍勢によって航海に追い詰められた絶体絶命のリスクが奇跡の魔力を生んだのだ。同じことが同じ規模で繰り返されようとも再び海が割れることはないだろう。なぜならモーゼは力ある者たちのルーレットのアソーギナユタをかけたよりも多く存在する目の中に一つだけ刻まれた奇跡を見事引き寄せることができたからだ。その天文学的確率に勝利できる力、そう奇跡をつかみ取る運気はすなわち魔力なのだ。強大な魔力を得るためには絶望的なリスクを背負わねばならぬ。魔力持たぬ者はそれを賭けでなく自暴自棄と呼ぼう。しかし真に魔力ある者はその奇跡をつかみ取り神秘を成就させるのだ。もしも私にその魔力があるならば私はその奇跡をつかみ取るだろう。生涯を費やした願いを実現できるだろう。
Kinzo looked up to the sky outside the window. He spread his arms as if appealing to someone up in the skies.
もし私にその奇跡を手にする資格があったなら、おー、ベアトリーチェ、ベアトリーチェ、お前の愛くるしい笑顔をもう一度だけ見せてくれ。どれほどの月日を経ようともお前の面影が消えることはない。 ただお前の美少が見たい、それだけだ。お前から授かったものを全て返そう。あの日からの栄光を全てお前に返そう。富も名誉も黄金もいらぬ。お前に授かった全てを返そう。私はただお前の美少が見たいだけなのだ。五章だ、ベアトリーチェ。
His nonsensical yells soothed into a scream, and then into a wail. Kinzo crumpled onto the floor and clawed at it with both hands. Genji had no choice but to wordlessly watch over his master's lament. Well, that was quite something there.
いやあ諸君、当主様は具合が優れられないとのことだ。せっかくこうして1年ぶりの会合に集まってくれた諸君と昼食を共にできないことを非常に残念にしておられた。ゴーダ、ランチを始めてくれ。
かしこまりました。それでは本日の昼食を始めさせていただきます。
南條先生、そんなにお父様のお具合は悪いの？せめて顔くらい見せてくれてもいいわよね。
体調というよりは機嫌ですな。こればかりはつける薬がありませんので。
おいおい、機嫌ってまたかよ。そりゃないぜ。こちとら秋のクソ忙しい時期にスケジュール都合してご機嫌伺いに来てるんだ。それをよ。
よかったじゃないか、ルドルフ。ご機嫌は伺えたんだ。それとも不機嫌な親父殿を私に代わりお前が説得して連れてきてくれるのか。
まさか。
Rudolph shrugged. Apparently, even though Rudolph seemed to resent the way his father did whatever he pleased, he'd rather voicing his face if he could help it.
夕食までにはその機嫌治りそうなの？クラウス兄さん。
そんなことは知らんよ。親父殿に直接聞いてみるといい。もっとも声をかけない方が機嫌の治りは早いと思うんだよね。
源氏さんだけだよ、じい様の機嫌を直せるのは。情けないぜ。自分の親の機嫌を使用人に直させるんだからよ。
ジェシカ、余計なことは言わなくていい。
She planned for her complaint to be heard only by her cousins, but it had reached even Cross's ears. Scold, Jessica scowled and turned away sulking.
機嫌がうんぬんってことは病状はそんな悪くないんじゃねえの？元気がないってんならともかく機嫌が悪いってのは少なくとも気はしっかりしてる証拠だぜ。
おじい様は特に強い気力をお持ちだからね。でも体が必ずしもそれに伴えるとは限らないよ。去年からずっと余命3ヶ月って言われ続けてる。最初の診断が正しいならおじい様は気力だけで流らえてるってことになる。気遣ってあげないといけないよ。
Lunch started with the family's head seat still empty. The man who should have been sitting there was already old, and the brilliant glory which had rebuilt the Oshirame family in a single lifetime was slowly being forgotten. No one seemed to feel uncomfortable when the meal began, with that seat still empty. Well, that is the end of Chapter 4 of Umineko, Episode 1, Legend of the Golden Witch. We met some more servants. We saw basically Kinzo staying in his study and letting out his frustration and true emotions on how he feels about his children. So yeah, that was Chapter 4. It was kind of a bit long in a way. We kind of got one of Kinzo's raging moments, which was a lot longer than the rage that he had in the prologue. I know that. But yeah, So again, that's chapter 4. If you liked the video, please subscribe, like, comment. I'll be posting soon some more videos of me continuing reading the story, because I just love this story so much and I just want to share it to everyone. So on that note, everyone have a good day, and I'll definitely be posting soon, and y'all have a good day.